The darkness of space is the coldest, most frightening thing in the universe. When you see what devastation it can inflict, it scars your very soul. The room on the screen in front of me is spinning in blood. A fresh, decapitated head floating right in front of my face as I struggle to keep watching. My friends, my colleagues, all dead from a terrible accident. An accident I could have prevented. Their dead eyes accuse me of my failure. Their screams puncture me like daggers. I'm only saved from the paralyzing nightmare by the sound of a phone call. 3 a.m. Unknown caller. I almost ignore it, but somehow I know what it is. Miles, there's been an incident. I'm half awake, grabbing my glasses, but I already have made up my mind. What incident? My wife is waking up, perhaps from the phone call, or maybe from the noises I made in my sleep. She tells me to decline, but the caller is insistent. An eternal pause from the caller. A ship returned with no one on board. What? How is that possible? There's dead silence, an ominous foreshadowing of what's to come. Just make it here as soon as you can. The ship doesn't have a scratch on it, built probably only in the last 6 months. It reminds me of something you might see in the movies. They give me files and data connected to the mission and tell me it's for my eyes only. As I begin to wonder if this was the right ship we're looking at. This was a commercial flight, the kind that people pay millions to experience space. Remember what is on the line and you'll understand why discretion is involved. Millions of dollars to keep this quiet too, I commented, recalling that not many flights had actually even happened. We pay them, make them sign a non-disclosure. It's hush money, but it gets the job done. It's the only way we can determine if these flights have a viable future, he told me. I look at the data they have on the return trip. Most of it is scrubbed, wiped clean by either the ship computer or some kind of interference. How did it land if there was no pilot? Why do you think we called you? You're the expert here, not us. Find out what happened, and we'll make it all go away. He was presenting me with a chance to get rid of the last 6 months, a chance to get out of my constant hell. And if I do, you'll drop the investigation and wipe it clean? His nod means everything to me. One thing, this is for your eyes and ears only. No one can know this ship made it back. These people had families. We don't want to share anything with them until we find out more. Families? This same guy from 6 months ago is telling me he's worried about the families? Was it about them, or all about the bottom line? Either way, I have no choice but to take this on. Step 1. I read everything I could about the makeup of the ship itself. It was small, compact, really only designed for short space travel to and from Earth. While I didn't understand how the thing was fueled, it was clear that they spared no expense making sure it was safe for the people aboard. As I went through the passengers' information and backgrounds, I couldn't help question how these people afford this trip. Even us company employees don't get a coupon day to afford such a flight. Stepping aboard felt like I was inside an ancient tomb. The rooms were empty except for items and clothing that each person was allowed to bring aboard. As a flight engineer, my job is to analyze the craft's pre- and post-flight to make sure that everything is working safe and sound for the upcoming flight and ones to come after. But not everything is as straightforward as it seems. My wife Dana told me that she would support me even if I did leave to become a data analyst like I planned to in college. Then at least I would have been able to pay for Julian's hospital bills. But the appeal of living out a childhood dream was irresistible. The video journals hooked me, connecting me to the missing crew, especially when I learned how they were managing to make the trip so rapidly. Day 4 of our journey to the exoplanet. This is the heaven in space. Once we hit the planet, homeward bound we come. The video claimed. Homeward bound indeed, but minus the crew. 6 people don't vanish like that. There's no evidence they left the ship at any point. In fact, there's actually no evidence they were ever on board. I told Dana that night at dinner. She could see I was frustrated. Maybe that's the answer? Maybe they were never aboard to begin with, and this is some kind of wild goose chase, she suggested. My stomach twisted in knots. Why would they even play games with me like that? Just an excuse to fire me since they couldn't find one before? Be careful. Leisure and space may not be the boon we all think it is, Dana told me. That night, I stayed up drinking a bottle of whiskey and considered doing it, making the phone call and finding out if their families knew anything. As I stared toward the stars though, I realized something felt off. I was either hallucinating or it looked like the stars were falling toward my house, one by one, gentle streams of falling light cascading overhead. I watched for a little longer, fascinated by the sight, and then heard a rustling sound coming from the other side of the hallway. Turning, I saw a jagged beam of light streak across the dark hallway, making me jump and hit my head against the bookcase. The noise woke Dana. "Are you coming to bed?" she mumbled. I stared at the sky, noticing the stars had returned to normal. The strange beam of light I'd witnessed was gone as well. For a moment, it felt like I was staring at the woman in the video. How could that be? Ghosts don't exist. I climbed into bed, a bit more paranoid than the moments before, and tried to get some sleep. For some reason I couldn't explain, it felt like the room was spinning as I fell asleep. The next day, I was called to make a progress report and had nothing to show for it. "It's been almost 48 hours. We were told you are the best. Or is this going to be a repeat of what happened to the Alabama crew?" "I'm not entirely sure what it is you expected from me. I'm just a flight engineer, not a miracle worker. And to be frank, I haven't really seen any evidence of faulty parts or engineering." "That's what you signed off last time on the Davis shuttle, and look at what happened." "Yes, I am fully aware of what happened to those lives, but I did my best to bite my tongue. There is nothing to suggest the same thing happened here." "Of course not, but there is a precedent. Is your judgment skewed? Now either you can do the job, or we can find someone else." Would they really find someone else though? They needed someone who was on the fringes, someone they knew wouldn't go to the authorities or news because it was against their self-interest, someone they had under their control. After the meeting, my colleague had a more direct tongue lashing to give me. "You told me that the Davis thing was an accident, and you told me that this mission could save my career, not sink it," I snapped back. "Because your record was impeccable. I wanted to think the last time was a slip-up. I know what happened with your son, but they're right. We might just be wasting our time here." "Give me one more day. I'm close," I insisted. It was a lie, but I got it. On that day aboard the ship, I devoured every scrap of evidence that was available. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I told myself I needed to devote myself to this thing before it became the end of me. Maybe it was because of that I started hallucinating on the way home, or maybe something aboard the ship was starting to gnaw away at my sanity. "They're not dead, you know," a voice in my head told me as I pulled up to my drive. It was a passenger from Davis, my one big fuck-up, their hands drenched in blood, sitting in my backseat. "You're not here. You're not real. You died 6 months ago." Of course I did, but they didn't. You know that, Miles. You see what they can't. He teased. His voice was as sharp as ice, as insane as a clown. But was he right? Was I just trying to run from my past, and that was why I couldn't focus? I closed my eyes, trying to block out the images of the Davis shuttle breaking apart at the seams in its ascent into space. That flight was only 2 astronauts on a potential mining mission, not a flight for fun and games. Nonetheless, their screams were drowned out by my son throwing a football into a trash can. If I don't look beyond this, I will lose everything, I told myself. Potentially jail, potentially divorce, potentially losing my Julian. I got out of my car and offered to toss the football with him. We threw a few bombs and darts, the sun setting behind us. As it turned dark, I held the football close to my chest, a renewed energy to make this work settling into my bones as I threw the football towards him. Both of us watched it as it slowed down mid-air, drifting like a frisbee. Then, it came to a complete halt, hanging in the air as though suspended by a string. I froze, standing there in the driveway looking at it, looking at my son. "Dad, what's going on?" he whispered. His confirmation told me I wasn't just losing my mind. I reached for the football and plucked it from the air, feeling a surge of energy shake me as I told him we should go inside. Go wash up and get ready to take your medication before bed, I told him as I placed the football down and then walked to the kitchen. Everything okay? You look like you saw a ghost, Dana said as she finished prepping dinner. Never mind. You wouldn't believe me even if I told you, I said as I scratched my head and looked toward the stars out our kitchen window. Again, they streaked across the sky, this time faster. Like a snow globe being shaken, they danced across the heavens. Dana, are you seeing this? I asked as I got her attention. She paused from cutting vegetables and saw it too, a look of surreal terror on her face. Miles, what is happening? She asked. A few moments later, the shaking stopped, and we looked at each other in fear and silence. I feel lightheaded, I admitted as I reached for the medicine cabinet. Then, our son called from his room. It sounded like a scream. Both my wife and I moved towards the stairs to see what was happening, but as I ran to the first step, the headache I was experiencing started to compound my entire body. Then, as I lifted my foot up to attempt to climb the stairs, my body pushed itself upward, and I found myself grabbing a hold of the banister in panic. I was dangling there in mid-air the same way the football had earlier, suspended as if I was in outer space in zero gravity. My wife experienced the same thing a moment later, her body cascading toward me as I had to let go of the banister to avoid her crashing into me. What the hell? Dana screamed as she hit the wall, pushing against it and bounding toward the second floor. I held my hand against the wall and did the same thing, pushing myself toward the next floor, trying desperately to get back to solid ground. Julian, where are you? My wife frantically called out as we both struggled to move in the zero-gravity environment. We pushed the door to the bathroom open, where to our surprise, a flood of water gushed out from the other side. Except this wasn't a torrent. It was a gigantic blob that hit us and swallowed us whole, pushing my wife and I back toward the stairs. I was scrambling to find anything to hold on to. Amid the chaotic waters, I saw the beams of light streaming across the room again as my headache subsided. A few seconds later, the bizarre sensation of floating came crashing down, and Dana and I found ourselves on the floor. We didn't have time to even ask what had happened because we still had to make sure Julian was alright. We rushed to the bathroom and saw him still on the floor, completely drenched. It looked like he had started to shower at the exact moment the zero gravity struck us and had then been suspended, unable to stop the room from flooding. My wife immediately started CPR and I called 911. I had no idea how I would explain any of this because I hardly understood it myself. That night, as Julian lay in a hospital bed struggling to breathe, I found myself thinking about the mysterious ship that had returned from its voyage to the stars. Somehow, my son was close to death from drowning because of it. I was certain that the two things were connected, but I didn't dare tell my wife anything. Instead, once I was sure she was sound asleep next to him in the hospital room, I returned to the ship. It was late, but I knew they weren't planning to remove my access until the morning. I still had time to figure this out. Stepping foot on the ominous vessel, I thoroughly checked every inch again, but this time, I was certain I wasn't alone. Even though my eyes weren't seeing anything, I felt a presence. "Who is there?" I demanded as I entered the ship's library. Suddenly, the vessel started to shake. Then, the books on the shelf began to hurtle toward my head. Something was pissed that I was here. One of the books slammed into a computer screen behind my head, breaking it apart like a projectile. It was immediately clear, whatever the intentions of this entity, they weren't friendly. I decided to try something radical and powered up the entire ship, including the engines. I wanted to replicate what the people aboard had done before they disappeared. The more I did this, the harder the ship shook. I started to hear alarms outside. I didn't have long before they found me. I took things a step further, activating the experimental engine that was supposed to help them achieve light speed and cross the threshold to the exoplanet. And that was when all hell broke loose. The shaking became so intense I couldn't even see straight. The ship's gravity hurtled me toward the roof, then slammed me back down on the floor. And the streaming lights that had plagued me began to form cohesive forms, bodies that were both familiar and distant to me. I recognized one face instantly, the female passenger that had left the journal. Her features reminded me of a spirit wandering an endless, ethereal plane. And as I tried to find my footing, I heard her voice along with the others telling me that I did not belong there. Suddenly, one of the beams of light struck me straight against my chest, pushing me back until I slammed into an emergency release. The chaos I had started ended as quickly as it had begun. Moments later, they came and hauled me out for questioning. I was placed in a metal box like some kind of animal. You realize tampering with that equipment could cost us millions, maybe even billions of dollars. I trusted you, and it looks like all you've been doing is just mucking things up, just like the last time, trying to find the easy way out. I was sick and tired of him throwing me under the bus, so I decided to hurl mud straight back at him. Stop acting so self-righteous. You are the one that insisted I look the other way to get the Travis flight moving along. We knew that ship was faulty. We knew it, Tom. I shouted in his face, loud enough that any recording could hear it, and before he could even dare to try and land any other accusations against me, I added, I was promised the best treatment available for my son, just so this thing could get off the ground, and it looks like it's been nothing but disaster ever since. If it's anyone's fault, it's yours. I said 6 months ago this commercial flight business needs to just be shut down. There are things that are not meant to be explored, no matter the gain. Ordinary people shouldn't be paying their way for tourist flights to the stars. Some things just shouldn't be attempted. You don't get to decide that. The only reason you still have a job is because we agreed to handle that mess. Now tell us what you found aboard the ship, or I swear to God, your son's treatments will be coming out of your own pocket from now on. Tom growled. I didn't have the guts to take that chance, so I offered what little I knew from the time aboard the vessel. I don't think the crew is dead. In fact, I think they are trapped in some kind of suspended state of dimensional consciousness. When I tried to replicate the launch, I saw them there. What? Like they transcended space and time? Human bodies can't do that. I know what I saw, and there's more. The same thing happened at my house. Like whatever happened to them has infected me. You're talking nonsense. We are probably centuries away from being able to do anything like that. He got up and closed the files, sighing in frustration. I have to give a full report in the morning, and then we will be closing this up, paying the families and telling them it was an accident. If you know what's good for you, you will just go home and forget about this. I couldn't help but think of the trapped crew, stuck aboard the scrap until it was burnt up and discarded. You know how dynamite was invented, Tom? By accident. I know you think what I'm saying is impossible, but it happened. We've crossed a line we shouldn't have crossed. It's like I said all along. Greed took us somewhere we shouldn't have gone. Lovely. And greed will keep you quiet, he said, tossing me an envelope with a blank check. We won't need your help with this anymore, Miles. Dismissal stung. I sat down in my armchair at home and thought of my sweet son Julian and how he was fighting for his life again, all because of me. I tried to drink the anger and frustration away, telling Dana that I would return to the hospital in the morning. Instead, she came home to tell me that our son's condition was worsening. As soon as she entered the door, I felt an overwhelming sense of doom. What happened, Miles? I experienced it, but I still don't understand it, she said as she collapsed into my arms. I did not have the strength for tears, but when our bodies embraced, something truly awful occurred again. Both of us suddenly felt weightless, and I tried to let her go to make it stop. A surge of zero gravity suddenly enveloped us all around, and she screamed as lights danced around us. What is happening? She screamed again as the light covered her body. The house shook, and it felt like it was being plucked from the ground itself. Before I knew what was happening, the space outside our house turned into space itself. As Dana and I reached for each other, we suddenly saw silhouettes of figures surrounding us in the house. I saw the beings of pure energy, the ones that had been aboard the ship, and they were preparing to strangle my wife. I had only one chance and pushed myself toward them, pushing her out of the way. They entangled my body, and I felt the anger and frustration transcend my very soul, their screams and wails piercing my flesh like daggers. At the same time, the entire house spun in our eyes, end over end. All around us, our beloved home was being torn apart by the cascading gravity well that was forming. Dana hit the staircase, falling unconscious as furniture and common items fell toward her. It was only thanks to the zero-G they didn't have a severe impact. At the same time, they attacked me, my body hitting the kitchen table as our cutlery nearly sliced across my chest. I could feel their burning eyes on me, accusing me of not freeing them. Were we doomed to fall into space because I had failed to save them? I called out my wife, but soon found out I was struggling to breathe. It's as if we were in the atmosphere of the clouds, but I knew we were stationary on Earth. I pushed my feet forward and swept across the room, grabbing Dana and cradling her as we were losing oxygen by the second. Suddenly, it all came crashing back. Everything around us regained its center of gravity. I looked to Dana, and she wasn't breathing. I immediately performed CPR like I did with Julian, but it was too late. She was unconscious. The strings of lights flashed across the sky toward the horizon, toward where I knew the ship was being held. I had Dana taken to the same hospital as our son, and did my best to not lose my sanity when the doctors told me the diagnosis for her and Julian wasn't good. How could all of this happen because of what I was investigating? I knew the answers had to be on board the ship. Judgment was tossed out of the window. All I wanted was to be free of this madness. I snuck on board the spacecraft, attempting again to awaken the crew from whatever temporal anomaly they were trapped in. Their spirits could pass on to an afterlife beyond here, I told myself, if they could simply be free of the ship. But was it possible? Or was this new madness brought to Earth? I activated every system. The lights danced across the room and began to form what looked like a corpse on the far edge. That's never been there before. Eventually, the corpse revealed that the crew had lost their physical bodies very painfully, imploding within the temporal distortion that we had undoubtedly caused. These poor passengers had lost their lives, only leaving their hate and anger to live on. I documented everything to show the world what this had done to them and what was being quietly covered up. Even if my own family may not make it, others need to see what this greed had caused, I decided. Their angry spirits were let loose into the world beyond, wailing as the ship ceased to function. And at last, I decided to leave as well. The night was still, the sky dark and devoid of stars. I once looked up there and hoped for a better future. Now I feel empty inside. All the heavens are offering us is more ways to harm ourselves. And I doubt we will ever fully learn this lesson.